Get this filthy animal off my restaurant!
Sir, please, I have a child waiting at home. I'll wash the dishes, whatever.
Go back to your stinking sewer!
Garrett glared. Garrett snapped his fingers.
Teach this animal a lesson. You can't just beg anywhere!
Brody grabbed Booker's collar, slammed him against the doorframe. A button popped off the frayed shirt.
Knees, black dog!
Booker did not move. Brody kicked the back of his leg. Booker dropped. Garrett patted his head like a dog.
Look at this pathetic begging face. Fine, you want to eat? Sing for a meal, then maybe I'll feed you. Drag him onto the stage!
A burly security guard dragged the black man along. In just a moment, the entire room would fall into a deathly silence as the black man spoke. To understand what was about to happen on that stage, you have to rewind 2 hours, back to the alley behind Holloway's on Beacon. The restaurant sat on the corner of Charles and Mount Vernon, in the heart of Boston's wealthiest neighborhood. Brass fixtures, white linen, a reservation list booked 6 weeks deep. Friday night, late October, the kind of cold that turns breath into smoke. Garrett Holloway had inherited the place from his father 8 years earlier and turned it into a kingdom. Patek Philippe on the wrist, a spot on the Children's Hospital Gala Committee every December, and a reputation among his staff for calling the police on anyone who lingered too long near his front door. 4 calls this year alone. Vivian Marsh, his head server, had watched every one. Vivian was 52. She had worked at Holloway's for 20 years, since Garrett's father still ran the kitchen. She remembered when the restaurant fed firefighters for free on Christmas Eve. She did not recognize what it had become. For 2 weeks, she had been leaving plates on the dumpster lid in the alley. Half-eaten porterhouse, untouched rolls, cold soup. She did not know the man who came for them. She only knew he never took more than 1 container, and he always rinsed the dish before leaving it stacked beside the bin. Tonight, Garrett sent her home at 6. Slow night, he told her. It was not a slow night. The reservation book was full. She knew exactly what it meant. She walked to her car. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time before turning the key. In the alley, Booker waited until 8, then 9. The dumpster lid stayed empty. He had not eaten in 36 hours. He sat on a crate beneath the fire escape, hands tucked under his arms. His coat, camel, torn at the elbow, mended with black electrical tape, was the only thing he still owned from his old life. Eleanor had picked it out at Barney's the winter she was pregnant with Marcus. Marcus was 12 now. The dialysis center had given Booker one final extension. Monday morning, 8 o'clock, $180 after Medicaid. Miss it, and Marcus moved to the public wait list. The average wait was 8 months. The hospital did not say what happened to children who waited. Booker had nothing in his pockets. A paper bag, a folded program from the Metropolitan Opera dated March 2018, a photograph of his son smiling around a dialysis port. On the back of the program, in Eleanor's looping handwriting, was Marcus's medical record number. She had written it down the week before she died, in case Booker forgot. He never had. He closed his eyes. Through the back door of the kitchen, faintly, a tenor was singing on someone's radio. Puccini, Nessun Dorma. Booker pressed his palm against the brick wall and waited until the aria ended before he opened his eyes again. Then he stood up. He walked around the corner to the front of the restaurant. He did not go to the dumpster anymore. He had decided, somewhere between the 3rd hour of waiting and the 4th, that dignity was worth more than another night in the cold. Through the front window, he watched a woman at table 6 push away a porterhouse after 3 bites. She was in her late 30s, dressed for an event, an opera program from the Boston Lyric resting beside her wine glass. Her name was Charlotte Pendleton, though Booker did not know that yet. She would not know who he was for another 90 minutes. He took one breath. He stepped inside. The host was on the phone. The maitre d' was at the bar. A young waiter, Mason Crowley, was folding napkins at the service station and looked up as Booker approached. That was when Garrett saw him from across the room. And that was where the story you just watched began. What none of them knew, not Garrett, not Mason, not the four men laughing at table 11, was something simple. Not even Vivian, sitting in her car 3 blocks away, knew it. The man in the torn coat had once been called the rarest American instrument since Robeson, and he was about to remember why. "The plate at table 6, Booker said to Mason. "Could I take it home? I'll wash dishes, all night." Garrett was already crossing the floor. He pulled sanitizer from his vest, sprayed his palms 3 times, then sprayed the marble at Booker's feet. "Brody, walk this thing out." Brody seized Booker's elbow. "Sir, just the bread then, please." Garrett raised one finger. Brody stopped. Garrett snatched the cap off Booker's head and threw it on the bar. He nodded. Brody yanked the camel coat down from behind, trapping Booker's arms. Garrett pulled it off and dropped it on the floor. He turned to table 11. "Gentlemen, would you eat next to this?" They laughed. "My son," Booker said, 12 years old. Dialysis Monday morning. I lost my wife 8 years ago. Every dollar goes to him. Please." "Louder! These people paid for dinner." Booker said nothing. Brody slapped him backhanded across the face. A woman cried out and did not stand. "Boss asked you a question." Booker turned his head back. His eyes did not drop. He repeated it, louder. "Did everybody hear that?" Garrett spun. "Son, Monday. Dialysis." A child at table 8 tugged her mother's sleeve. The mother covered her mouth. Garrett softened his voice. "I'm a generous man. Children's Hospital Gala every year. Entertainers earn their meals here." He pointed at the jazz stage. "Sing for the room. Then maybe I'll feed you." He nodded at Brody. Brody pressed down on Booker's shoulders. The knees hit wood. Garrett crouched and rested his palm on Booker's head, like a man touches a dog. "Say please. Properly." Booker looked up. He did not bow. "Please." Garrett clapped once. He laid a 20 on the stage. "Tip jar. Don't choke, boy." He turned to the 4 men. "Take requests." "Mammy, make him dance!" Garrett laughed. He did not correct him. Brody hauled Booker up by the collar and dumped him onto the wood platform. The shirt tore at the shoulder. The cap landed at his feet. "Hat off, boy." Booker stood. One cheek burned red. His knees dusted gray. He did not pick up the cap. His hand moved to his breast pocket. His fingers brushed the folded Met program, the photograph of Marcus. He took one breath, and for the first time in 8 years, his diaphragm engaged. The first note left Booker's throat at a volume the room had not asked for and could not refuse. It was low, a baritone's middle register anchored deep in the chest, the kind of sound that does not arrive at the ear. It arrives at the sternum first, and the ear catches up afterward. Garrett was already turning back toward table 11, his mouth open to deliver the next joke. The next joke did not come out. At table 4, a woman lifted a forkful of risotto halfway between her plate and her mouth. The fork did not continue. It did not return. It stayed where she had paused it, suspended in the gold light, while her wrist forgot what it had been doing. 2 tables over, a man tilted his wineglass to set it down. He did not set it down. The base hovered an inch above the linen, the dark Bordeaux trembling against the rim, and his hand stayed where the music had caught it. At the bar, the sommelier was decanting a Chateauneuf du Pape into a crystal vessel. The bottle was angled, the wine moving in a slow ruby thread. He did not straighten the bottle. The pour continued for 1 second longer than it should have, then stopped entirely. The sommelier stood with the bottle still tipped, staring at the platform. Mason was carrying a tray of empty glasses back toward the dish station. He set the tray down on the nearest surface, which was not the dish station, and forgot it. His hands hung at his sides. The second phrase began. The room's chatter, which had been louder than the music for the first 3 seconds, was no longer louder. It was not gone, exactly. It thinned. The conversations did not stop on purpose. They stopped because the people having them lost track of what they had been saying. Underneath the thinning chatter, something else became audible. The espresso machine behind the bar had been running all night at the same volume. No one had ever noticed it. Now it noticed itself. The hiss of the steam wand was suddenly the second loudest sound in the room. The low electric hum of the refrigerator under the counter joined it. The soft creak of Mason's leather shoe as he shifted his weight came through cleanly across 30 feet of linen and crystal. Booker had not raised his voice. The room had simply gotten quiet enough to hear the rest of itself. The aria moved into its middle phrasing. The notes climbed. At table 8, the little girl who had been kicking her chair leg through the entire appetizer course stopped kicking. She did not stop because her mother told her to. Her mother had not noticed yet. She stopped because the sound coming from the small wooden platform had reached into her body and asked her to be still. Her body had agreed before her brain had voted on it. She turned her face toward Booker. She did not blink for a long time. She had never heard opera before. She did not know that she was hearing opera now. She only knew that something was happening in the room that her chair kicking was getting in the way of. Her mother looked at her, then followed her eyes to the platform. Her mother forgot to lower her hand. Booker felt his ribs widen further. The second phrase carried into the third, and on the third phrase, the voice cracked. It was not a large crack, a hairline, a small dry place at the top of the register that 8 years of silence had laid down like dust. In the dressing rooms at the Met, he would have walked the phrase back and tried it again. There were no dressing rooms here. There was a plate of cold porterhouse on table 6 and a son in Roxbury who needed dialysis Monday morning. He made the decision in the breath between 2 notes. He did not walk the phrase back. He absorbed the crack into the line and kept moving, the way a violinist absorbs a missed bow. The crack became part of what the listeners were hearing. Because it was honest, the room believed it harder than a clean note. The fourth phrase opened. At table 11, Daniel Hawthorne reached into his jacket pocket. He did not pull out his pen. He did not pull out his notebook. He pulled out his phone. He opened the voice memo application and tapped the red circle. He did not lift the phone toward the platform. He set it face up on the linen and let it record what the room was hearing. He did not type a single word. At table 6, Charlotte Pendleton was already on her phone. She had it pressed against her cheek under the curtain of her hair. It was the way a woman pretends to take a call so the room will not interrupt her. She was not pretending. She had dialed a number she had not dialed in 2 years. She was leaving a voicemail. What she said into the phone, the room could not hear over the music. What the camera of her memory was recording was the row at the Met in March of 2018, a Saturday night, her father beside her in a borrowed tuxedo, the program for Rigoletto in her gloved hands. She had been 30 years old. The voice on the stage that night was the same voice coming off this small wooden platform now. She had not forgotten it. She was very sure of what she was hearing. Her voicemail ended with 3 words spoken low and clear into the receiver. Please, hear this. She set the phone down. She did not pick up her wine. The aria reached its climb. Booker pulled in a breath that began at his hips and ended behind his eyes. On the held note, he did not let go of it. The note rose. It held. It kept holding. He counted 9 in the back of his mind, the way Theodore had taught him to count at Juilliard. The wine glass at Garrett's elbow, the one he had set down too hard a minute earlier, slid 1 inch across the linen tablecloth and stopped. Nothing else on the table moved. The note resolved. Garrett's smirk, which he had been rebuilding for the past 40 seconds, came apart. He looked around the dining room of his own restaurant for someone to share the joke with. He had shared every joke in this room for 8 years. He found no one. Every face was turned toward the platform. Not one was turned toward him. He had lost the room without noticing the moment it left. The aria closed. 4 seconds of silence followed. It was the wrong kind of silence for what had just happened. The room did not know what to do with it. The silence held long enough that one of the men at table 11 cleared his throat, and even that sound felt like an apology. Then a single pair of hands began to clap at table 6. A second pair joined from the kitchen doorway. Then the room remembered itself, and the applause came up like a wave hitting the wall behind the bar. Booker did not bow. He stepped off the platform. He did not pick up the cap from the floor. He did not pick up the 20. He walked toward table 6, toward the porterhouse plate. His one good arm was already lifting to take what Garrett had promised him. The applause was still cresting when Booker reached table 6. He did not sit. He stopped beside the chair Charlotte had not yet returned to and looked down at the porterhouse plate. The plate was cold. The fat had begun to congeal in a soft white ring around the bone. None of that mattered to a man who had not eaten in 36 hours. He reached for the plate. "Cute trick." Garrett's voice cut across the room. The applause faltered but did not stop. He stepped between Booker and the table. "Karaoke nights Thursdays. We're done here. Brody, show our guest out." Booker did not look at Brody. He did not look at the plate. He turned, slowly, until his eyes were level with Garrett's. A second silence began to gather in the room. It was not the same silence as before the aria. This one had teeth. "You asked me to sing for it, sir." Booker's voice was as quiet as it had been when he had first walked in. The room heard. "Will you keep your word?" Garrett's jaw worked. He had not been spoken to inside his own restaurant like that in 8 years. He took half a step back, gathered his shoulders, and turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to apologize for this." He gestured at Booker with the back of his hand. "This man has been loitering behind my dumpsters for 2 weeks. He came in tonight uninvited. There was never any agreement. None of you saw what you think you saw." He pointed at the 4 students at the corner table. They had been filming from the moment Brody had grabbed Booker's collar. "Those phones, hand them over, now, or I'm calling the police and pressing charges. Trespass, theft, coordinated harassment of a Boston business." The 4 students did not move. One of them, a young woman in a navy sweater, turned her phone toward Garrett. She wanted to make sure he was still inside the frame. At table 11, Daniel Hawthorne stood up. He was not a tall man. He did not need to be. He set his cloth napkin on the chair behind him. "Mr. Holloway, my name is Daniel Hawthorne. I write the restaurant column for the Boston Globe. I'd like to speak with you tomorrow about what I just watched in your dining room. On the record." A small intake of breath rippled across the nearest tables. 2 patrons reached for their own phones, not to film, but to look up his byline. At table 6, Charlotte Pendleton stood up. She did not raise her voice. "Mr. Holloway, I'm an attorney, Pendleton and Whitlock downtown. Your next sentence in front of every witness in this room is going to be evidence in a lawsuit. I would think very carefully before you choose it." Garrett's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He closed it. The 4 students kept filming. Booker looked at the plate one more time. He did not pick it up. He turned away from table 6 and walked back across the dining room. He moved without hurry, the way a man moves when he no longer needs to apologize for being in a room. His camel coat was still on the floor where Garrett had dropped it. He bent down. He picked it up. He shook it out once. He pulled it over the torn shoulder of his flannel shirt. He did not look at the cap on the platform. He did not look at the 20. He walked past Brody, who had not moved since Daniel stood. He walked past Garrett, who had not breathed in 10 seconds. He walked past Mason, who was holding a tray full of nothing. The host opened the door for him without thinking about it. Outside, snow had begun to fall on Charles Street. The flakes were the small, dry kind that catch in the eyelashes and stay there. Booker pulled the collar of his coat up against the wind, and stepped down off the curb. Inside Holloway's on Beacon, the dining room was the wrong kind of quiet again. A different wrong than before the aria. This one belonged to the owner. At the corner table, the young woman in the navy sweater hit stop on her camera. She had 11 minutes and 40 seconds of footage. She did not know yet that one of those seconds would end Garrett Holloway's life as he knew it. Hashtag Justice for Booker had not been hashtagged yet. It would be by midnight. Booker did not stop at the alley. He walked 6 kilometers south into Roxbury, the torn shoulder of his flannel hidden under the camel coat. The snow thickened the further he got from Beacon Hill. His fingers were numb by the time he reached Mrs. Loretta Hayes's building on Warren Street. She opened the door in her bathrobe. "He's asleep," she said. She did not ask where Booker had been. Booker stepped inside. The apartment was warm and small. Marcus slept on the pull-out couch under 2 blankets. His dialysis port was covered by a soft cotton sleeve Loretta had sewn for him. The boy did not stir. Booker sat down on the wooden chair beside the couch. He did not turn on a lamp. He reached into the breast pocket of his shirt and pulled out the folded program from the Metropolitan Opera. Rigoletto, March 2018. He opened it. The inside was creased white from 8 years of being carried. On the back page, in Eleanor's looping handwriting, was the line he had not let himself read since the night she wrote it. Marcus, BMC number B-4892. The medical record number. Eleanor had given him the program the morning before her last hospice transfer. He laid the program on the pillow beside Marcus's head. He did not say anything. Across the river, a Tufts sophomore in a navy sweater uploaded her clip to TikTok with one caption: "The Holloway homeless man." Sound on. It was 11 o'clock, 40 minutes since Booker had stepped down off the curb. In an office on Morrissey Boulevard, Daniel Hawthorne deleted his Porterhouse review and started his column over. In Quincy, Vivian Marsh sat in her car dialing a number she had not used in 3 years. In an apartment 38 floors above Lincoln Center, an old man set down a phone he had been holding to his ear. He sat down on the rug. On a low bookshelf behind him, a brass plaque caught the streetlight. The words Metropolitan Opera showed clearly. The name beneath them did not. In Roxbury, Booker fell asleep in the chair beside his son. The voice the room had heard that night had once been called the rarest American instrument since Robeson. Now, finally, the world was about to find out. By 6 o'clock Saturday morning, the clip had passed 800,000 views. By 9, it had passed 1.2 million. Garrett Holloway woke up to 43 missed calls and a Bloomberg notification about his own restaurant. He did not panic. Men like Garrett Holloway do not panic. They hire. By 10, a crisis PR firm out of Back Bay had drafted his statement. By 11, Garrett was sitting in front of his iPhone in his Beacon Hill living room. He wore a navy sweater chosen by his consultant. He recorded a 2-minute video. In the video, he wiped his eyes once. He explained that the man in the clip was a known transient who had been threatening his staff for weeks. He explained that a head server, Vivian Marsh, had been quietly leaking footage to harm the restaurant after a workplace dispute. He explained that a wallet had been stolen from a guest's coat at the front rack 3 days earlier. He had filed a police report that morning. The wallet had never existed. The guest had never existed. The police report did exist. At 10 minutes after 12, 2 Boston police cruisers pulled up outside Mrs. Loretta Hayes's building on Warren Street. Marcus was eating cereal at the kitchen table when the knock came. He saw his father stand up. He saw 2 officers in the doorway. He saw the handcuffs go on over the torn camel coat his father had slept in. He did not cry. He had stopped crying about hospital things 4 years ago. But the spoon stayed lifted halfway to his mouth, the same way a fork had stayed lifted at table 4 the night before. Mrs. Loretta Hayes put her hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your daddy will be back," she said. She did not know if that was true. By 2 in the afternoon, the country club crowd had closed ranks around Garrett. 2 Boston city councilors issued statements praising small business owners who keep our neighborhoods safe. A conservative talk radio host out of Worcester opened his show with the line, "This is what happens when you let aggressive panhandlers into upscale establishments." The clip was no longer a story about a homeless man who could sing. It was a story about a thief who had been caught. Vivian Marsh was fired by text message at 2:11. The message read, "Effective immediately. Don't come back for your things." Her son was a semester away from finishing his certificate at Bunker Hill Community College. She had been counting on her last paycheck to cover his books. In a holding cell at the South End station, Booker Sullivan sat on a metal bench and said nothing. His belongings sat in a clear plastic bag on a shelf 6 feet from his cell. The camel coat, the torn flannel shirt, the folded program from the Metropolitan Opera, the photograph of Marcus. The officer who had inventoried the bag had not opened the program. At 3:11 that afternoon, Mrs. Loretta Hayes called Boston Medical Center. She explained that Marcus's father had been arrested. She explained that the 8 o'clock Monday appointment could not be paid for. She explained that Marcus had already missed 2 sessions. The scheduler put her on hold for 9 minutes. When the call resumed, it was not the scheduler on the line. It was the attending nephrologist. Dr. Margaret Wells had watched the Holloway clip at 6 that morning. 16 years earlier, she had also watched a PBS broadcast of a baritone singing at Tanglewood in the rain. She remembered the name on the program. She had been a medical student then. The name had stayed with her. "Bring Marcus in Monday morning," she said. "We will figure out the billing later. Bring him in." In an office in the financial district, Charlotte Pendleton was already on her 3rd pot of coffee. On a whiteboard in front of her, she had written 3 names: Holloway, Hawthorne, Bramwell. Beneath them, she had written a 4th, Sullivan. She had 2 associates, a paralegal, and 1 weekend. She intended to be ready by Monday. On Saturday afternoon in Philadelphia, Adele Sullivan was teaching 2nd grade music at Lee Elementary. One of her students held up a phone. She asked Ms. Sullivan why the man on TikTok had her last name. Adele was 21 years old. She had not spoken to her father in 8 years. She did not recognize the man in the camel coat on the small screen. Then he sang. She walked out of the classroom without dismissing the children. By 6 o'clock, she was on I-95 northbound. She had a midterm on Monday morning that she was not going to take. At a mobile station outside Old Saybrook, she scrolled. Mason Crowley, a junior server at Holloway's, fired by text that afternoon, had posted everything. He had decided not to stay quiet. The post listed every order Garrett had given Brody, every line he had denied. And one detail Adele had not heard before. Her father had told a room full of strangers about a 12-year-old son who needed dialysis on Monday morning. Adele sat in the driver's seat with the gas nozzle still in her tank and did not move for 5 minutes. She had a brother. She got back on the highway. At the same hour, in an apartment 38 floors above Lincoln Center, Theodore Bramwell was packing a leather briefcase. He was 70. He had been music director at the Met for 14 seasons. He had taught a young baritone named Booker Sullivan at Juilliard. He had not seen him in 8 years. Into the briefcase he put a rehearsal recording from 2013, a copy of Opera News dated May 2018, and a notarized letter signed by the Dean Emeritus of Juilliard. He took the last flight out of LaGuardia. Charlotte Pendleton met him in the lobby of the Liberty Hotel at 11:30 that night. They had never met before. They knew each other on sight. "You called me at 2 in the morning, Theodore said. "I want you to know I would have come even if you hadn't said his name." "You taught my father's scholarship class," Charlotte said. 10 years ago. Halloran Pendleton, the Chamber Music Fellowship. I was at the dinner you spoke at." Theodore looked at her for a long time. "You were at the Met in March of 2018. Row F with my father. It was the last time he heard live music before the stroke. He gave me the program. I still have it. She did not tell him she had memorized the voice on that stage and carried it in her head for 8 years. He did not need her to. Booker and I were rehearsing a chamber piece when Eleanor died, Theodore said quietly. We never finished it. I never asked him to. We are finishing something else tonight. By midnight, the 4 Tufts students had uploaded the full 11-minute clip with no edits. Megan, a sophomore from Roxbury, had insisted on filming from the moment Brody touched Booker's elbow. Her grandfather had played organ at 12th Baptist for 40 years. She knew what a voice was worth. She had been taught. By 2 in the morning, 2 former Halloway's employees had posted accounts of wage theft. By 6, Daniel Hawthorne's column was the front page of the Sunday Globe. Booker Sullivan was released from the South End station at 8:40 Monday morning. His belongings were returned in the same clear plastic bag. The program was still folded inside the breast pocket of his shirt. He took a cab to Boston Medical Center. Loretta paid the driver from a Ziploc of singles she kept for emergencies. Adele was already in the waiting room outside Marcus's dialysis bay. She did not stand when she saw her father. She did not cry. She did not say, "I'm sorry." "Where is he?" Booker looked at her. "In there. He's on the machine now." "How old?" 12. She sat down beside him on the vinyl bench and did not speak for 30 seconds. "Take me." Vivian walked into the waiting room from the elevator without anyone hearing her arrive. She held the gray wool cap in her hands. She did not say anything either. She placed the cap in Adele's lap. Adele took it. She turned to her father and pulled it onto his head slowly, the way a daughter does when she is still learning how to be a daughter again. Booker began to cry, quietly. He did not cover his face. It was the first time he had cried in 8 years. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon, Booker Sullivan walked up the granite steps of Symphony Hall in Boston. His daughter walked on one side. His son walked on the other. Theodore had not booked a press conference. Theodore had booked a sidewalk. There were no tickets. There was no admission. The steps were open to anyone walking down Massachusetts Avenue. By 2 o'clock, the crowd was 4 deep across the entire block and growing into the side streets. Marcus had taken his Monday, Wednesday, and Friday dialysis appointments. Dr. Margaret Wells had refused to hand him over to the public wait list. He held his sister's hand. He had only known her for 15 days. He had decided he liked her. Theodore Bramwell stepped to the microphone at 3 o'clock. "My name is Theodore Bramwell. From 2004 to 2018, I served as music director at the Metropolitan Opera. The man behind me sang the principal baritone role in our 2018 Rigoletto. He is the finest American baritone of his generation. He has been homeless in this city for 8 months. I would like to ask why." Charlotte Pendleton stepped forward. "My name is Charlotte Pendleton. I am filing on Mr. Sullivan's behalf a civil action against Garrett Halloway personally, defamation, fabrication of a police report, infliction of emotional distress." A second attorney beside her stepped to the microphone. "My name is Reginald Whitlock. I am filing a parallel action under the Massachusetts Civil Rights Act and the state hate crime statute. The defendants are Mr. Halloway and his employee, Brody Vance. We have 11 minutes of unedited video. We have audio. We have witnesses." The crowd absorbed it the way a sponge absorbs water, quietly, completely. The Boston Licensing Board had voted on Friday to suspend the Halloway's liquor license. 2 of the city councilors who had defended Garrett were no longer returning press calls. 1 was no longer running for re-election. Vivian Marsh came up the steps from the second row. She carried the camel coat folded across her forearm. She had washed it twice. She had mended the elbow with proper thread. She helped Booker put it on over his shoulders. From her own apron pocket, she produced a worn $20 bill she had kept for 14 days. Booker took the bill. He walked to a small card table beside the microphone where a representative from Boston Children's Hospital waited with a clipboard. He laid the 20 on the table. He signed his name beneath it. The hospital had returned a check from Garrett Halloway by certified mail 11 days earlier. They accepted the 20. Booker walked back to the microphone. He had no notes. My wife was named Eleanor. She died 8 years ago. She left me 2 children and a record number written on the back of an opera program. I have not been able to sing since the morning she stopped breathing. I tried 2 weeks ago in a restaurant in this city. The first person who asked me to sing was not a friend, but the second person, in a way she did not know she was my wife. He stopped. He looked at Marcus in the front row. And the third person was my son, who needed me to. He turned and nodded to a pianist Theodore had brought up from Tanglewood. The first chord opened. It was not Rigoletto. It was a spiritual older than the country. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Booker sang it the way a man sings the only line he has left to say. Halfway through the second verse, Adele stepped quietly up behind her father and began to sing the harmony line beneath his voice. She did not aim her voice at the crowd. She aimed it at his back. The PBS boom mic above the steps caught her anyway. In the front row, Marcus stood up. He was 12, 93 pounds, attached to a dialysis schedule for the rest of his life. He stood because his father was singing, and his sister was singing with him. Behind Marcus, the second row stood, then the third, then the entire crowd, all the way to the side streets, came to its feet without a signal. No one applauded. Applause would have interrupted what was happening. Booker closed his eyes on the last phrase. He had closed his eyes that way every time he had heard a tenor sing for 8 years. Not from grief, from the duet he and Eleanor had once rehearsed in their kitchen. He let himself hear it now. The phrase resolved. Booker did not bow. He stepped down off the platform and crossed 3 stairs to Marcus. He knelt in front of his son. This time, he chose to. Marcus put both arms around his father's neck. 90 minutes later, Garrett Halloway's crisis PR firm released a statement. It contradicted 2 of the things Garrett had said on Saturday and 1 from Sunday. The Globe posted all 3 contradictions side by sundown. Hashtag Justice for Booker had been the top hashtag in the country since Sunday morning. By Monday, it was an order. In the first week, a Beacon Hill family canceled a 50th anniversary dinner at Halloway's. They sent a letter to the Globe under their own names. Within 11 days, 2 of Garrett Halloway's 3 private investors had quietly withdrawn their capital. By the 3rd Friday, Iggy's Bread had ended their wholesale relationship. The North End seafood supplier followed by Monday. No-show rates climbed to 60%. Garrett was paying his staff out of pocket to maintain the illusion that the restaurant was still operating normally. In the 6th week, Halloway's on Beacon posted a notice in its front window. Closed temporarily for renovations. It never reopened. The Boston Licensing Board permanently revoked the restaurant's liquor license in the 5th week. The Suffolk County District Attorney's Office opened a criminal investigation into the false police report Garrett had filed against Booker. Garrett lied to the investigators on his first interview. He lied again on his second. That lie became the second charge, obstruction of justice, and it was the one his attorneys could not negotiate away. Brody Vance was charged separately. Felony assault, felony civil rights violation under the state hate crime statute. Brody, 26 hours into a holding cell that smelled like the one he had helped put Booker in, agreed to testify against his employer. He pleaded down to a misdemeanor, 2 years of probation, and the permanent loss of his security guard license in every state. Garrett pleaded as well. Misdemeanor on the false report, misdemeanor on the obstruction, probation, community service, no jail. But his name now sat on a permanent public record. He could never apply for a Massachusetts business license again. The country club crowd that had closed ranks around him on Saturday morning opened its hand and dropped him by Thanksgiving. 2 Boston city councilors refused all Globe follow-up requests. 1 did not run for re-election. The conservative talk radio host out of Worcester changed subjects within 48 hours and never mentioned the case again. Brookline Country Club declined to renew Garrett's 12-year membership. Boston Children's Hospital sent back his annual gala donation by certified mail with a 1-line note. They cited the screenshot of his palm on a kneeling man's head. The screenshot had been viewed 30 million times by the second weekend. The man at table 11 who had shouted "Mammy" was identified by his own colleagues at a Cambridge investment firm. He was no longer employed there by the end of the second week. Garrett's father, retired in Naples, Florida, did not return 6 months of phone calls. Garrett posted a long essay on LinkedIn about cancel culture and the death of small business. It received 12 likes. He sold his Beacon Hill brownstone in March and moved to Charleston, South Carolina. His wife's mother financed a small bistro under her daughter's name. The sign above the door did not say Holloway. Adele saw the bistro photograph once. She opened a Charleston Post and Courier article on her phone in the front row of Tanglewood the following August. The mustard cashmere vest was gone. The pomade was gone. She swiped past it without showing her father. The civil settlement was sealed. It was enough to pay for Marcus's dialysis for the rest of his childhood. Boston Children's Hospital established a fund. They named it the Eleanor Sullivan Pediatric Renal Fund. 14 months after Symphony Hall, Marcus received a kidney. The donor was a woman who had set down her napkin at Holloway's that night. She had watched her husband pull her hand back into her lap. Her husband had tested first. He was not a match. She was. They never told anyone why they had checked. Booker accepted a guest artist residency at Tanglewood for the following summer. Theodore conducted. PBS broadcast the recording. After the season ended, Booker moved to Philadelphia and shared an apartment with Adele and Marcus. He slept in a bed for the first time in 8 months. Vivian Marsh was offered the head manager position at a new bistro on Newbury Street. The owner had been at table 4 the night Booker sang. Charlotte Pendleton founded a small legal aid initiative for unhoused defendants facing fabricated charges. She named no one's father. Mason Crowley wrote Booker a letter on hotel stationery from a job interview in Providence. Booker wrote back. They became, against the odds, correspondents. Booker handed Adele the folded program from the Met. March 2018, Rigoletto. The morning she moved his boxes into her Philadelphia spare room. She framed it. She hung it on the wall of the music classroom at Leah Elementary. Underneath it, in her own handwriting, she wrote a single line. The voice in your head was real. 8 months after Symphony Hall, Booker Sullivan walked onto the wooden stage of the open shed at Tanglewood. He wore a torn camel coat he had not replaced. The Berkshire Hills behind him were green. The seats in front held 6,000 people. Adele, Marcus, Loretta, Vivian, and Charlotte sat in the front row. Theodore stepped onto the conductor's platform. He had chosen one aria. Cortigiani, vil razza dannata. He had sung it to Eleanor the night before her coma. She had whispered her last clear words. Sing it for me at Tanglewood one day. He had not been ready until tonight. The pianist's hand hovered over the keys. Theodore lifted his baton. Before the first chord, the audience went quiet. The silence was the same shape as the silence in Holloway's 8 months earlier. Same length, same weight. But one had waited for him to break. This one waited for him to give. He gave, the eyes watching him from the front row. 3 of them, the right number for the first time in 8 years, were not measuring him. They were with him. Marcus held his sister's hand the entire aria. He did not let go on the cracked phrase. He did not let go on the held note. He did not let go when his father closed his eyes on the final line. When Booker opened his eyes, he found his son already standing. He stepped off the platform and crossed to him. He did not kneel this time. The boy was almost as tall as his shoulder now. If you've made it this far, answer one question in the comments. If you had been at table 6 that night, would you have stood up before Charlotte did? Or would you have sat there, waiting for someone braver? If you watch the original clip again, and 400 million people already have, go to minute 9:43. Watch his hand. Watch what it reaches for. Only the sharpest eyes catch it. If this story moved you, share it. Subscribe. There are more voices in alleys behind restaurants than you'd believe. In an empty Lee Elementary classroom that night, the framed program caught the last light through the window. The custodian flipped the switch. The room went dark. The voice in your head was real. 2 years later, behind a West Philadelphia diner, a 14-year-old boy with a cello case stopped beside a young man huddled in the cold. Marcus knelt. He did not say sing for it. He asked the question his father had asked first. He asked if the young man was hungry, and he waited for the answer. Hashtag Justice for Booker.
The story's over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We easily believe people have to earn half, prove they deserve it, show us they're trying hard enough, grateful enough, worthy enough. We want a story before we give a sandwich, a reason before we offer a hand. But this story showed me how ugly that logic is. Sing for a meal, that's what it sounds like when you say the quiet part out loud. We are horrified because it's cruel, because no one should perform for the right to it. But we do this every day, just quieter. We look at somebody asking for help and run a calculation. Do they deserve it? Are they really that desperate? What did they do to end up here? We turn compassion into an audition. We make people prove their suffering before we will believe it. And if the story isn't sad enough, if the tears aren't convincing, we keep walking. Hunger doesn't need a backstory. Pain doesn't owe you an explanation. A person standing in front of you asking for help has already done the hardest part. They ask, that should be enough. So this week, have somebody without asking why they need it. Don't audit their suffering. Don't check their story. Just have. If you had been in the table, would you have stood up? I would recommend hit like, subscribe. See you next time.